Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome back to the Live Train Perform podcast. I'm your host, Sean Kober, and joining me today is the team from Swiss 8. We have Adrian Sutter and Anthony Meixner. How are you, boys?
Good, mate.
Good.
Good.
All right. It's been a while since we've had a conversation for my podcast. You guys had me on your podcast recently, Instructions Sold Separately, where we went through my journey coaching at Tiger, going over to Russia, coaching Peter Yan, being in the corner, so on and so forth. I'll have that episode linked in the show notes. I did actually share that episode recently for my podcast as well. But that was a great conversation. There's a lot happened since I've had you guys on my podcast last. So I just want to check in with you guys, see where you're at, see what Swiss 8 is doing, share with the audience, where you guys are at the moment, your vision, the direction that you're moving in, and how they can potentially help you. So just quickly, for any new listeners that are tapping into the podcast, can you give me a brief introduction to yourselves and what Swiss 8 is?
I'll go first. Do you want me to go first, Mex?
Yeah, go for it, mate.
I'm Adrian. I founded Swiss 8, obviously, ex-military, ex-army like you boys. And yeah, like any new listeners, unfortunately, when I left the military, a lot of my mates took their own lives. And it's a bit of a problem in the veteran community, suicide. So I myself, Mex, and a few of the other lads wanted to do something about it. And we started Swiss 8, which is a proactive mental health charity run by veterans using veteran lived experience to try and solve some real world problems.
Short and sharp, mate. Love it. Let's go, Mex.
Mate, the story's
Carry
fairly
on from
similar.
there.
I mean, it's all about 17 years old, joining the army, looking for that tribe. So a lot of these things that you'll hear us talk about through the show is all from lived experience, and these sort of things that I drew off as we went through 20 years in the infantry. You'll notice a lot of these common themes coming through, but 17 years old, standard, best soldier on the planet, comes from a broken home, looking for that tribe, looking for that sense of family. Went through the infantry, did everything wrong, got out of the infantry, did everything wrong, and then started an app. And this is where we're at, mate.
Mate, you just made a point there, like about doing things wrong. Like when you're going through it, you think you're doing the right thing. But then, sometimes you go through periods where we've all gone through this, where you kind of lose your tribe, you lose your connection, you lose your people, you lose your focus, your direction, your motivation, and your identity, and when you're in it, like, you don't really know. You don't know how to fix it. Like, it's not until you look back in hindsight where you're like, oh man, if I had have known what I know now, I would have done things a lot differently, and I wouldn't have been in that funk for as long as I was. And that's the whole point of Swiss 8 in my mind. And, again, for new listeners, I'm an ambassador for you guys. Adrian contacted me a couple of years ago and asked me to come on board. And I was like, what's the deal? What's Swiss 8 about? So on and so forth. I'm going to make sure that I'm only affiliated with brands that I trust in, I believe, I use myself. And, basically how you summed it up, Sutter, is, you're a guy that's taken these lessons that you've learned from your military experience, and you've just simply reapplied them and these principles and these lessons into the civilian community, and, have gone on to build your own thing, create your own path, back in a civilian society that doesn't understand what you've been taught, what you've gone through. And, I'm very proud to be a part of that process. And that's essentially what we're doing, is taking these lessons that we've learned, these principles that have been taught to us, and just simply reapplying them. And, for me, man, like, the last couple of years has been a big one, where normal people can take these principles that we've gone through, that we've made mistakes with, that we've integrated into our lives. And, when the pandemic kicked off, people lost their jobs, and people losing family members and their livelihood and things like that. They were going into quarantine and lockdown, and, not seeing their tribe. And, that obviously affected mental health. And this is something that we as veterans have gone through when we get back from deployments, when we get out of the army, when we're transitioning back to that civilian society. Can you guys just touch on that for a moment?
I mean, I'll touch just really quickly. I mean, that's you're exactly right. Like when we first started Swiss 8, we did a bunch of research. We'll call it research. It's internal research, but we just did surveys of our community, and that's something that a lot of PhD candidates and unis had struggled to do, like trying to do professional uni studies on the veteran community. First, you have to get them to sign up and say, I want to. And a lot of, I mean, let's be honest, when you get those emails saying, do you want to sign up for a study? It goes straight Control-Alt-Delete. But, and so they didn't, no one really had great cut through with 18 to 40-year-old males who had been in war zones. And so a lot of the research, we were looking at it going, it doesn't really line up with what we're experiencing. So we need to ask our audience and find out what's going on, what's causing their mental health decline. And we did this survey, and the 4 biggest impacting factors were disconnection from tribe, failure to maintain routine, loss of identity was the highest. And no one really understood that. But they knew that I used to look in the mirror and see a soldier. Now I don't know what I am. And then purpose was the 4th one. And so, like when you break those down and go tribe, routine, identity, purpose, that's something military members are very familiar with, but that's not a veteran problem. That's a human problem. And then, like you said, we're building solutions or interventions for veterans, then realizing that they have utility for everyone. Then we hit the pandemic, and everyone on the planet, well, everyone, from what I could see anyway, everyone in Australia is going through the same thing. They're uncertain about who they are, what they're supposed to believe in, what their values are. They don't know if they've got a job. They're getting anxious and they're getting depressed. And that's when we kind of made the decision to go, Swiss Aid is a charity built by veterans, but it's for everyone. We can't hold tools in the veteran community that have value for everyone. So, yeah, mate, absolutely agree. It's the pandemic's opened everyone's eyes to the veteran kind of experience. And from what the research we've done, it is very, very dependent on identity. And unfortunately, that's the thing that veterans lose the most when you leave the military, because we don't have a decent transition out that focuses on the psychology behind changing your identity.
Yeah, that's a great point, mate. Like when you join the army, you go through, boot camp, essentially recruit training, and then you go into your initial employment training or your trade school, if you will. And, you get taught how to become a soldier to serve a specific role from, a dude that just walks in off the street who's gone through the same kind of cycle of life that most other people have gone through. But then when you become a soldier, like you get taught that, and then you're a lot different. And a lot of people haven't really experienced what that kind of world is like. And then when you discharge, you don't get any training how to reintegrate back into society.
Yeah, mate. I had to give a talk on this about a month ago, or a month and a half ago. It was at a post-traumatic stress forum, and it was a little bit daunting because it was a room full of qualified psychiatrists, and then me going up there to tell them that all their research is wrong and they should be focusing on something else. But no, that's what I was focusing on. I was focusing on identity through transition, and I was looking at rites of passage, like through history, without giving the whole speech that went for bloody 20 minutes. Through history, we've had rites of passage to transition through stages of life when we changed identity. And in my life, I know the biggest thing missing, like Mex was touching on, like you go join the army to find tribe, and kind of prove yourself amongst your peers. And we don't have an adolescent rite of passage anymore in the Western world. Like boys to men, there's no change. One day you're allowed to drive a car, the next year you're allowed to drink beers, and that's kind of it. You don't get any training or any kind of instruction on how to become a man. And that I touched on, like, that is why chivalry is dead. That is why masculinity is now toxic. It's because we've got 30, 40-year-old boys instead of young boys and then men. But anyway, yeah, like you said, there is this, the only rite of passage that I've had successfully through the 3 stages is Kapuka, like transitioning me from civilian to soldier. I was given new values. I was given a new lifestyle, new haircut, new image, new identity, and then celebrated into the army as that new person. And then takes you 6 months to train a civilian to be a soldier, and then they spend 15 minutes signing you out and taking your ID card at the end. There needs to be, I mean, that was the point. There needs to be some form of training that takes you from soldier back to civilian, changes your identity, changes your values, or not changes, but adjusts and gets you ready for the real world again.
Yeah, there was.
Is this something that you guys? Sorry, Max. I was just going to ask: is this something that you guys are looking to address with Swiss 8, not just for people that have gotten out, that are going through or have been through that transition process? Maybe they're having some mental issues, mental health implications, etc. Like, are you guys again using that proactive model, looking at inserting yourselves into that transition process at some stage in the future and giving people an understanding of what they're likely going to come up against, what they're going to feel, what they're going to experience before it happens?
I think we have to. I mean, Max, jump in whenever you want. I think we have to. I mean, we are very eager to get involved in the using lived experience, like Max was saying, and get involved in the transition training for soldiers on their way out. But one thing, like I said, these are human issues. Like the identity is the hottest topic on the planet at the moment. Everybody wants their own, and we can break that down for hours if you want as to why. I think that's kind of we're in that stage of society, but everyone wants their own identity, and identity changes through stages of life for everyone. Like anyone changing jobs, moving cities, professional athletes is a demographic we definitely want to work with because that's all the same problems. They have a big identity crisis when they used to be a famous footy player, and now I'm Jono, who used to be a famous footy player.
Yeah.
But there is, yeah. I think we have to. I think we need to take all the lessons we've learned from the veteran community, veteran space, and then start building training on identity transition for everyone.
Well, I mean, this is going to have absolute utility if we look at the curve of automation and computer systems and how that is going to start reducing those lower labor intensive jobs that we can automate garbage deliveries, interstate truck drivers, all these cars that are coming on that are going to start making jobs obsolete like we've never seen before. If we can master the transition piece now ahead of the curve, in 10, 15 years' time when this is starting to become prevalent, absolutely. Because we look at the capitalist system and how we work in society, that identity piece is there's limited education about that. And half of that is, okay, who's Cobes? Oh, yeah, I'm strength and conditioning coach. That's who I am. We identify with the job that we do and not with the person. There's some really great stuff out there that can allow you to knock the edges off any transition from different jobs and that identity piece. And I surf, I'm not a surfer, etc. But yeah, this transition piece is super important. And over the next 15 years, it will be an industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Now, when I first came on board, you guys had your 8 principles of health and wellness. Now, since that time, you guys have kind of made some changes to those principles. For myself and for the audience, can you guys touch on those changes and why those changes occurred?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of circles back to that research piece we did when we found that tribe, routine, identity, and purpose were the 4 main factors. And I mean, we built the Swiss 8 app to target the routine piece. And then we first envisaged that tribe building or reconnection style events would be another vertical or another product line within Swiss 8. And for that, fundraising events and kind of tribe building activities would be used to help people establish purpose. And then over time, I mean, I hope that we will be like this, agile for as long as Swiss 8 exists. If we built something and we find advancements or we find things that need to be changed because of the feedback we're getting, we're going to do that. We're not going to be stuck in our ways and go, no, we listed them as the 8, so they have to be the 8 forever. Like, that is a very religious mindset, and I'm not a big fan of it. And so anyway, we took minimalism and time management and looked at them and basically said all the programming, all the life hacks that we can give people in those 2 can fit in discipline, and that will give us the room to put tribe and purpose as their own pillars within our kind of 8-pillar model. It helps tie everything together. So your 4 principles or your 4 tribe, routine, identity, and purpose can all be improved within the app. And it just brings it kind of front of mind because we know that tribe and purpose are far more important than minimalism or time management. Like, they're all valuable, they're all required, but you want the big ones at the top on the 8 in the app. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking on tribe, this is something that has changed dramatically over, the last couple of 100 years, pretty much since like the Industrial Revolution, right? Like, the world's population has exploded, and gone are the days where, you have the same 50 people that you see every day, that you interact with every day, being the people that you work with, your family, your neighbors, your friends. Like, you see those same people, the people at the grocery store, and you know their names and you interact with them. You know their family members, so on and so forth. Like, we don't live in that world anymore. We live in this world that is better connected than ever, but also the most disconnected that it's ever been with, this technology. Like, internet is great, right? But, we used to live in these times where your tribe or your neighborhood and your environment, if you had any issues, you would essentially put those things aside, or you'd address it head on, right? So that you can clear that up, you can keep your tribe working together towards the same purpose of, working together for survival. Now we don't have that. Now people can say whatever the fuck they want from any corner of the world, and there's pretty little ramifications from it. People don't have that interconnectedness and that intimate relationship with people that they're seeing on a daily basis, and building those connections deeper and deeper. If you don't fit in with your environment and the people around you, you can now go onto an internet forum, and that becomes your tribe.
Yeah, there's two
Yeah.
2 points there. The first one is that we're creating ecosystems, echo chambers on our social media that people just regurgitate and reverberate whatever particular narrative we're going down. So we are really compartmentalizing society into these specific different areas. The other one is like we're fairly transient as human beings now, bar a couple of people where you grew up in the same house and you know your neighbor left and right. I lived in a house. I'm probably the worst for it. I didn't know my neighbor left and right. They invite you around for barbecues. You would go home to a court, and you would be surrounded by people that you know. You knew your neighbors. Your kids would all play in the same street together. You all played in the same football team. Now we're transient. Everything's online. Yeah, there's mental health implications that you don't see until they present themselves.
Yeah, I mean, technology is evolving far quicker than humans, and I think that's a fundamental problem, and I think it's one that needs to be addressed. I have no idea how, so I'm not going to pretend I do. But we are still biologically, again, this is objective, I guess, but everything I look at, I like to look at anthropology and go, what were we doing? How have we evolved? What makes sense? And if it makes common sense, then kind of dig down the rabbit hole a bit deeper. And we are still biologically evolved to a point where we need to be in small tribes. And there's a hierarchical system within human tribes. But I mean, I know tribes are all different sizes. I kind of stick to that Dunbar's number of you can have 150 people in your kind of largest tribe. And that's how we are physically happy, healthy, and kind of get along with life. The world's got so big, and this is not a population reduction argument, but the world's got so big, and our governance has too many people for one leader or for a two-party system. And it's got to the point where, I mean, politics is one thing, but we have essentially lost the tribal structure, and we need it so much that we're itching to find a new tribe. And a lot of people have turned to politics now because religion's no longer a viable option. And it's red team versus blue team. In all Western democracies, it's red team versus blue team. And that's a terrible political system, but I'm not going to argue that. The problem is our creativity and our ability to have opposing ideas is now limited to red team or blue team. So whereas back in the day, smaller tribes, 320 million people in America, or what's there in Australia, like 30 million people. If we break that down into tribes of 150, I'm not going to pretend I can do quick math and figure out how many that is, but that's a lot of different kind of cauldrons to brew different ideas, different ideologies, and then they come together, hopefully peacefully integrate ideas and whatever. But at the moment, we're at a point where no matter what you think, if you believe in research on one side, then you're not allowed to have mixed ideas. You have to have a polar opposite idea, and that's it. And that is dividing everyone. I think we need to find ways to go back to localized tribal systems and communities in order to be happy. I don't know how, but
You just made a great point then. You made a great point, man. Like, people are looking for like that larger tribe, and they draw the line in the sand, and it's like us and them, but they're not going out and finding and creating their own tribe. And this, we need to take some responsibility on this as well. Like, the people that we surround ourselves with, our environment, how we interact with others, we get to create our own tribe. And within those tribes, you don't just want people that agree with you. Like, I want people that I can have deep conversations with, that we can disagree upon things and have, and go through the pros and the cons of each side and have a legitimate debate and have a discussion. It's not an argument, it's a discussion, it's a debate, and, come to a solution. Hey, maybe, because here's the thing, like, if you're constantly talking about the same thing and you agree upon everything, like you never get challenged on your ideologies. right? And if you're not challenged on that, then how can you actually, one, consolidate that information and that ideology, or think on the other side? And I enjoy having those deep conversations where people get me thinking about, elements that I may not have thought about, and I may not necessarily change my opinion, but I'm thinking about other things that I may have forgotten or missed out on. And I'm like, okay, I see that point of view now, and that's either going to strengthen my argument, or it's going to put light on some things that I hadn't considered and maybe sway me back towards, the center. It's like, I want to have conversations with people that I don't necessarily agree with, so that I can look at what my ideologies are and what my thoughts are on certain things. And if I don't have a way to communicate that well enough, then I probably don't understand it well enough. So then I need to start questioning my own thoughts.
Well, I mean, wasn't that supposed to be universities and that they're places now where you can't have those conversations? Like they're very one sided, and you just get branded as a bigot or sexist, racist, whatever label, and they shut those conversations down. It's going to be a place. It's going to be a scary place.
Yeah, you're 100% right, mate. That is exactly what's happening. If, people are finding their tribe, and it's all people that agree with them and have the same vision, the same idea, and it is that echo chamber, and that tribe, those smaller tribes are creating this culture of us and them. Like, well, if you disagree with us, or if you disagree with this point, then we can't be friends. And like, it's getting to the point where people are fucking, disowning family members and friends and things like that, man, because they just don't agree upon one point. They might agree upon 100 things, but they disagree upon 3 things, and those 3 things are what are at the forefront of their mind and cause issues with those relationships.
Yeah, mate. I mean, this all ties back to like this being the most identity confused time in history, or in history as we know it. I mean, I know people do say that the Roman Empire got to this point as well, just before it collapsed, and this is kind of where the Western world's heading. But it's confusing, and it's the university bit's the scary bit, because young people don't know who they are yet. I mean, I'm 36 and I'm just starting to figure it out. Like, young people don't know who they are, and that's what we used to get from our tribe, was our identity and values, and those 2 things kind of go hand in hand. Your identity is kind of structured on what your values are, and when you're young and you love yelling at protests and screaming like most uni students do, it's because you're trying to figure out who you are. But unfortunately, and I don't blame America, but like, it's American models of society and politics that trickle down to Australia. And we're starting to see it here now too, that politicians are looking to lower the voting age so they can get more identity confused young people to vote for terrible, terrible concepts. And that's where it links together. It's like we're governed by...
They can then play to emotions
Oh, it's
rather
all
than rational
emotion.
thinking.
Yeah, you move as a kid, you're all emotion, and it's like babies having tantrums. You just throw the toys out of the cot until you get a smack and start to learn some things about life, and that's what you shape your values and who you are off. But yeah, mate, I think, unless, I mean, I don't want to make future predictions for the entire world, but I think unless we solve this identity problem, the Western world's in a pickle in the next decade or so. Hopefully not, but it's looking that way. And I mean, I don't know how long you want me to rant for, but like, where I believe this is coming from, like, you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and nowhere in the West do we have to worry about the bottom 2 rungs anymore. We don't have to worry about, like, Uber Eats will literally drop me food anywhere I want at any time. I can sit inside, never leave the house. Food's not a problem. Shelter's not a problem. Entertainment's not a problem. We're all the bottom 99% of society that was used to spending all their time and energy focusing on food security and shelter now have too much free time. And because of that, we're all moving so far up Maslow's hierarchy that we all think that we are creative geniuses, and we can change the identity of ourselves, and we can all be this individual person. Some parts of that's fantastic, but it's causing 3 to 5 value sets to skew out into 500 million different identities that we have to worry about. And I don't know. I don't think you can maintain in this day and age a strong social structure. You can't have strong defense forces. You can't have a stable country when everybody thinks they are an individual with their own identity that everybody else must bow down to. I think we're in a pickle.
Mm. You make a great point there, and kind of touches on the hierarchical system that we spoke about before. When you have those smaller tribes, everyone's a role player, right? You've got the head of the tribe or whatever, and then you've got the people that support him or her, and then you've got people that do certain roles and have different responsibilities within that smaller tribe, and that's being lost, man. We kind of touched on this actually last time we had a conversation for your podcast about the benefits of being within a sports team and learning how you fit into a team and understanding that sometimes you may need to make sacrifices for that team and you might be utilized in a role that you may not be as comfortable with, but that's for the benefit of the team. Someone else might be able to play in a better position. You can be a little bit more of a utility player, better utilized in a certain position. And, you know, I think that is definitely missing in the world that we live in these days. People do think that their opinion is just as important as the next person. And I mean, this probably sounds a little bit controversial to say, but I fucking tell you right now, it's not. Like if people say to me, "Hey, Cobes, blah 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 blah," like there's going to be a number of people where I take their criticism and their points very seriously, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm clearly doing something wrong here. If I've pissed these people off, like I need to fucking change how I'm doing things, right? But then there's going to be other people that might say the same thing, and like I put no weight on their words whatsoever. I couldn't give a fuck about it, right? That's what people need to understand.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I don't know if you want. I was too busy laughing at it. You're 100% right. And I mean, it's about that's where people need to figure out their own value system is what do they appreciate? Because some people will look at it and go, I trust in that guy because he's got a university degree. I personally, and that's starting to get shady to me. I'm like, I trust in people who I've listened to and I appreciate their opinions and I see that they're well researched and they've actually thought it through. That's the kind of people I trust in. But yeah, you're right. If anyone off the street just walks up and gives me shit about a project or something, I'm not gonna. You're gonna try and take it if it's constructive, but not gonna pay a
Well,
great deal
it's
of
like
attention if you don't
when you
respect who
first
they are.
get into the battalion, your boss sits you down. He's 18 years old. He's just got out of RMC, and he's going to sit you down and do a financial plan with you. And your platoon sergeant's sitting next to him, like, what the fuck is he talking about? It's a cross between the lived experience and the respect of the people that are talking to you. Like, you go and see a psych or a psychologist or a doctor, and some of the GPs are some of the most unhealthiest looking people I've ever seen. They look like they're near death, gray skin, poor posture, overweight, and you're like, and they're telling you, this is what you got to do to get healthy. And I'm like, do you know what that is? And I think that's part of the thing you guys, especially you and Adrian, really live and embody the stuff that you preach. It's not a preaching; it's you live it, and you're like, well, we've done it, and we're going to adapt and move as we go. And then you couple that with the research, and I think this is why psychologists and psychiatrists are struggling at the moment in their treatment pathways, because there's also a limited amount of respect for the person.
Yeah, and the lack of psychs in Australia means that like the numbers in over the next 3 to 5 years will be 50% of psychs will be within their first 3 years out of uni. It's like I don't know if you're qualified. You might have the piece of paper, but I don't know if you're there yet. I mean, it's the same as like you probably hate it, Copes, because you could literally be someone's life coach. Like in all aspects, the majority of aspects of someone's life, you could coach them to be better at life. Yet there's 22-year-old kids out there calling themselves life coaches on the internet, and I'm like, what is your life experience that you are going to pass on to anyone and value add? And it's a credibility thing. Like pieces of paper and qualifications are literally coming in cereal boxes now. We have to look for legitimate value, quality, or whatever it is in the people that we're going to take advice from. And without deliberately trying to circle this all back together, it's because we don't have tribal elders anymore. We don't have those people within our communities that have been there, done that, and stuck around to pass on all their knowledge. And why that is, I don't know. It's like the most valuable part of tribal society we've just kicked to the curb.
That's a great point. We are transitioning, or I mean, it's fucking unfolded for the last century or so, where you mentioned it earlier, man. Like religion is nowhere near as prominent as it was. Back in the day, 300-400 years ago, it was like science versus religion, And, you know, dude, to me, like, I'm not religious at all, and I was not brought up in a religious family. However, I definitely see some of the benefits of the religion, and certain religions have been around for a long time because it is essentially a codified set of rules, right? This is what's being passed on from generation to generation. This is right. This is wrong. This is how you're going to live your life. And, you know, whether there's fucking God or the devil or heaven and hell or whatever, like, doesn't really matter. Like, that is just to get people to understand that there are consequences to your actions, and there's, you know, a lot of benefits of religious practices and spiritual practices which are falling by the wayside, which is a absolute shame to me, man, because, you know, there is so much benefit to that. And, you know, that wisdom has been around for such a long time, but now people just completely discredit it.
Let's talk about like dinner. So you know, praying before you go to dinner and being thankful. So instead of sitting around praying to God for all the things that you're thankful for, we just don't do that anymore because we don't believe in God. I'm like, you can still sit around and it's that appreciation piece, right? You could still sit around as a
Yeah.
family unit and be appreciative of the things you have, but because we've removed God out of it, we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. We don't go to church on Sundays as a community and come together. Like, they have routine, they have identity, they have a common cause, all these things that we lost with religion.
Tribe, bro. Tribe as well.
And this is where this is going to sound, I mean, remember originally they said don't worship false idols, and now the church is gone, we do start worshiping, we do any like Instagram models and anything, CrossFit, anything.
veganism.
Yep. You will, if you can find something that you can relate to, everything out of that person's mouth is gospel. No, I'm not saying bring back
Well,
the
it's
church.
celebrities now, isn't it?
Yep.
Celebrities are the new Jesus.
Absolutely. And they jump on and do political statements and you know, really drive that whole narrative. You're like, no, I think we need to go back and have a look at the positive from religious systems and bring them back into society. How? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to supply and demand as well. You mentioned earlier the 22-year-old life coach that doesn't have any fucking life experience that is telling people how to live their lives, right? Like, who's to blame? Is it that 22-year-old who's putting out that information, or is it the fucking people that are paying for that service? You know,
Yeah.
like, so it's a reflection of society.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. It's a reflection of society, and it's complex with layers. Like, I would never shit on a 22-year-old that's having a crack at starting a business by himself. I do shit on society for well, I mean, you want to make people believe that they can do anything. That's cool. But then there's a lot of desperate people out there, and they'll cling to anything that they think is going to make their life less painful. And unfortunately, there's plenty of marketing tools out there too to get the 22-year-old's message in front of that person. So, oh, mate, I'm a bit of a capitalist at heart. I think the market sells itself in the long run. If someone's a 22-year-old with absolutely nothing to offer, they might get a few clients. Good on them. They need to learn and adapt. If not, they're going to be out of business pretty quick. And that's kind of how capitalism takes care of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, there'll always be like flash in the pans, just like there's always different fads and, you know, these kind of cycles that we go through. Like, you look at fashion, man, like, you look at the diet industry, you know, fucking carbs were demonized and then, or fats were demonized and then proteins demonized. And like, it just goes in these cycles, like every 8 to 10 years, it happens again. Same thing happens with fashion. Right. So, and that's because, you know, as we mentioned earlier, people aren't clear on their identity, who they are, what they value. And when you're not clear on those things, you get pulled in multiple directions. You fall victim to all of the marketing. So again, who's to blame?
Yeah, I think the other thing, I mean, I'm wearing a very hippie-ish jacket now. I was waiting to see if that's why you're making fashion comments.
That's exactly why, man.
And me and Mex do talk about this all the time about going to different towns, trying to get yourself in a different mindset. You go to Byron Bay, you put on your Byron Bay costume. For a lot of people, I mean, one way you can look at it is like that person is just completely fake. They're pretending they're a Byron Bay local for 2 days and then they're heading straight back to Bondi. But at the same time, I think, I mean, this is especially for younger people that you do need to experiment with your identity. If you haven't figured out what it is yet, and you're still in the slow transition, like myself, from veteran to hippie, you got to play around with fashion.
Byron Bay local.
Yeah, yeah. This is from last time I was up there, mate. Haven't worn it since. But no, you got to experiment. As long as I think it's just being conscious of the fact that you are experimenting instead. If it's dangerous to wake up one day, put on your Byron Bay shirt and go, everything today is going to be super happy and peaceful because I'm a hippie today, and then you get hit by a bus and you're like, fuck. And you need to be conscious of the fact that you're experimenting and you haven't actually transitioned into that new identity. So maybe don't change all your social profiles to happy hippie 69. Like, it's a process.
And if you do buy into the fashion, just hold on to it for 15 years. I've got stuff in my wardrobe that's coming back into fashion now. I'm like, fuck yes, it'll be good.
Exactly,
It
mate.
will.
It always goes around in cycles. Now, what I want to talk about next is, you guys, last time we had a conversation, we spoke about what you're working on, Mex, some of the projects you're working on to help people rebuild their tribe and find their purpose. And, you spoke about the Finke Desert Race. Now, that obviously unfolded. Can you talk about like that process, what you guys got out of that, what the lessons that you learned were, and some things that you're going to take away from that moving forward, and then maybe some of the projects that you're working on?
Oh, absolutely, mate. So from a tribe perspective, I think the Finke was a massive success. We went away. We took a bunch of current serving guys from some pretty high stress environments and took them away with a group of guys. Most 80% of that group were high speed individuals, and we brought one or two guys in that needed that hand to see what it was and how it was going. Got a lot of support from defense. We partnered with them. Well, we got a bit of sponsorship. I think we paid for the sponsorship, so it's perplexing.
Yeah.
And took them away, and really the whole experience, we sat around. I mean, a couple of times there, you'll see these kumbaya camp story with people that haven't got lived experience. Like, you can't shove this sort of stuff down people's throats. We had a couple of beers on one of the nights around a campfire, and probably within about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 or 3 beers in, people just started telling little worries and then stuff. And then there was a couple of guys that were from the mining industry that had been 30, 40 years in emergency mining, pulling pieces of people out of, mine explosions and stuff. And he just had never spoken about it. And because we didn't set up an actual kumbaya, here's your pipe, you hold it, you get to talk, and then we're heading on to the next one, it just flowed and it was organic, and it was in a group of people where, because you didn't make it a thing, they trusted and they believed in it. And it was really good, mate. I mean, outside of that, the exposure that the event generated was fantastic. And going forward, we're going to try and replicate that this year. Problem is, when you grabbing guys from those sort of particular units, it's on again, off again. So you don't know if you're going to get them or not. You have to register in February. By the time June comes around, they could be in 3 different countries by then. So, but
might be in Ukraine.
Yeah. Mate, so the Finke
on which side though? On which side? We're going down that rabbit hole.
Well, I mean, we'll circle back to this in a moment, but I want to hear, some of the projects that you're working on, the lessons you took away from that, and then we'll circle back to, how social media is showing what actually happens in war zones and how it can affect individuals, and it does really drive the light towards some things that soldiers have potentially gone through and why they may have some mental health implications. But we'll come back to that in a moment.
Yeah, so I mean, everyone used to put these particular units up on pedestals. We know now that the turnover rate's so high that these are fairly junior guys that some of them haven't deployed and were sitting around, and really it was such an even keel. But the professionalism that they moved into it with, we got orders as a race team, got delivered orders, full smack, woe to go. And that common language and that common, I used to fight it. Me and Adrian used to butt heads over it. But the common language, everyone just clicks straight back into, okay, well, this is what I'm doing. This is what part of the team I'm in. And
this is the role that I'm serving. Yep. These are my responsibilities. How can I play my part in the team?
Absolutely. And then outside of that, it is an event that it's a fun event that you can go to, that you can put a bit of a pilgrimage into. So from Brisbane to the Finke, stopping along the way, because if you don't have an excuse to do something, most guys won't do it. So it's a good excuse to get people together and teach them those tribe experiences. Those boys built relationships there or rekindled that are still going now. So.
Very cool. What are some of the projects that you're looking at this year or over the next year or two? Can you share anything on that, or we got to keep that hush hush?
Nah, mate.
Surprise, surprise, motherfuckers.
No. I mean, we'll be pretty open about it. We are tight for cash at the moment. We've hopefully there's an election coming up in Australia. One of the parties, the Liberal Party's committed $2 million to allow us to continue delivering the app to. I think we've got almost 7,000 Australian veterans using it at the moment. We're still having conversations with Labor. Hopefully they can come to the party, and veteran space is very what do you call it? Non-partisan. So hopefully it'll be the same. But that'll heavily impact where Swiss 8 heads over the next 12 to 24 months. We still have a strategic kind of roadmap in place. We started research in partnership with Newcastle Uni last year on 2 projects. One of them has finished now. The prelim results are out, and it's proven, young PhD candidates proven that using the Swiss 8 app over 8 weeks reduces your K10 score, which is your distress markers, anxiety and depression, which is fantastic. And then that was leading into what is our next main project. It's going to be a 3-year project, but we have started the research with Newcastle to build an artificial intelligence model to take all of the biometrics that we can currently pull from wearables, from the way we write, the way we talk, or as many avenues as possible, and funnel them into the app so that when you're using all of the programs within Swiss 8, you can track your own mental health markers. And that way, long term, obviously, it predicts mental health decline at an individual level. And yes, this might sound like we're kind of letting cats out of bags, but no one in the world's doing it at the moment. We're working to be the first. We've just got to make sure that we're funded to get it all the way through. And I guess the exciting part about that is all the models at the moment, all psych research, all surveys, all research in general, it's looking at in the medical kind of field, it's always looking at whole of society kind of models, and or looking at what was the most effective interventions for this type of person. And as we know, especially with fitness and nutrition, dietetics, like you touched on before, they're kind of soft sciences for when it comes to an individual level, in that you can't read a textbook and know what's going to be the perfect solution for every person on the planet. And those textbooks, they might be as accurate as possible to the current science or the current research, but everyone as an individual is different. And when you've got an AI model or an AI brain tracking you as a person and all your daily health and mental health or health and well-being kind of markers, you get a customized plan. And that's when we will need to work with partners like yourself, like a bunch of other organizations, to make sure when these people get this feedback, they have a custom built plan specific for them. And that's the long-term goal, mate. I mean, I going back to life coaching, I believe the goal for Swiss 8 is to build an AI life coach for every person who's using our software. And the metrics always will be, how do we keep people healthy and happier so that suicide becomes zero in the high-risk demographics first, and then the whole world, hopefully.
That's brilliant, man. I mean, we'll probably need to talk about this a little bit more offline, but anyone that has been listening to the podcast for a while knows that I'm pretty much running like that same system, that same model on a daily basis with, tracking health markers and health metrics like blood pressure, waking heart rate variability. Like, I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is walk across the room, turn my alarm off, open the blinds, get some light in, lay back down, put my heart rate, my chest strap on, put my blood pressure cuff on, hit my blood pressure cuff, take my blood pressure. All right, see where I'm trending. Next thing I do, hit my heart rate variability app, boom, see where my heart rate variability is, which is a measure of my autonomic nervous system. Am I sympathetically driven? Am I parasympathetically driven? Okay, and then I'll go and check, and it gives me a readiness score. And then I'll go and check my waking heart rate, and I'll check my sleep. All right, all of that data then gives me information, and that information provides knowledge. All right, well, this data says this. This is the information that it's providing me. Maybe today is a Thursday, right? I've trained hard this week. I've been working hard. My sleep's been a little bit off for the last couple of weeks because I'm working on my own projects. I'm pretty much working till 7:30, 8:30 at night, every night for the last couple of weeks, right? So I know that My sleep's a little bit depleted. I'm not getting as much deep sleep as I need, so on and so forth. So then I need to start making adjustments to my training. I need to start making adjustments to my nutrition. Maybe I'm in a sympathetic state. I haven't slept very well. I need to pull my training back a little bit. And I'm going to do a little bit more mindfulness, meditation based work. I'm going to eat maybe reduce my carbohydrates, maybe increase my fats, my proteins, my fruits and vegetables throughout the day. So I'm getting a heap more micronutrients, vitamins, minerals in, etc., to support all of this stress that my body's been under, right? So I can get back to recovering and functioning optimally, right? Maybe I turn my phone off a little bit earlier and go to bed a little bit earlier. I'm already doing all of this stuff, and this is something that I'm teaching with the podcasts and with the training programs that I'm building out at the moment, ebooks and things like that I'm going to have on my website. We're already going to be putting this stuff together. And it's like you follow the bouncing ball. If this happens, this is what we do. These are the options. If this happens, these are the options. And it's about looking at the principles. It's principles driven, right? And then you give people methods and tools that they can choose that are appropriate for them in that situation to, elicit the desired outcome. And that's what the AI does.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. Everything you say. I mean, obviously, that's why I believe that we get along so well, and that we obviously work together on stuff like this, is because we do have very similar mindsets. And everything you're currently doing, I think the biggest goal for what we want to build with an AI model is to take all of that and take the manual labor out of not the actual programming, the stress of thinking about it. So, I mean, I've seen heaps of memes, and it does make sense. It's like there's so many health and lifestyle tips out there now. It's like you need 8 hours sleep a day. You got to work for 8 hours. You're commuting an hour either way. You got to cook. You got to go to the gym. You got to meditate. Blah blah blah. It's like, how the fuck do you fit that in a 24-hour day? In order to track it properly, you've also got to add about an hour worth of metric monitoring and kind of coming up with your own fixes. So if we can remove that part of it and automate as much as possible, I think it works for the end user, definitely improving kind of mental health markers, but it also works hopefully for people like yourself who can use it as a tool in your own business.
It's a great point as well, is like, everything's interconnected. It's not like I just wake up in the morning and my HRV's low, meaning my body's under stress, right? And I'm in a sympathetic state. It's like I've been working really hard. I've also been training really hard. I haven't been sleeping as well. Some days my steps, my activity level's really fucking high, and my food consumption is really low, right? So that's all adding to my lower energy levels, and that's affecting my mood, my attitude, that's affecting my hormones, my neurotransmitter health. Like, everything is connected, and this is what people need to understand. Like, it's not like you just do one thing and it fixes everything. It's like, it's an integrated approach, right? We need to look at the different isolated systems, the different isolated things, and then integrate that into an overall holistic system.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. And I think that's where AI is changing the game. It's in research to begin with. So when do we start? So we say 2018. So 2018, I sat down for the first time with Newcastle Uni. I said, this is what I want to build. We've got a PhD candidate, and there's 8 pillars that people are going to be working towards. And they shit themselves straight away. And they're like, I don't think we're going to be able to pull it off. Because the old model of research was that everything's a control except for one variable. And that's how you do studies. And it's like, how can we, and that's where the data, I think research is so, a lot of it's so outdated in the health space. It's because you're looking at what's the better diet, carnivore versus vegan, without any other levels of complexity on the people's lifestyle. And the results are obviously impacted. So when you get an AI brain, we're moving into that kind of era where AI is a reasonable way to compute and to automate things. And it's like, if you've got an AI brain layering on, looking at every level of complexity possible that we can get a data input from in that person's life, then we can look at A, how to solve problems for that person. But B, I think the big one for us, it's like, if you're struggling to get candidates to do research trials, but you've got 10,000 veterans using an app, and all they have to do is go, all right, to be part of this trial, all I've got to do is say yes and just go about my life. The research possibilities, I think, are huge for starting to get way more accurate data in what nutrition is right for people, what fitness and breath work, meditation, yoga plays, whatever it is, and how that impacts your mental health and well-being.
You made a great point, man. Like if you can remove the barriers, people are more inclined to follow through on something and participate.
Especially veterans. Mate, you put one piece of friction or one obstacle in front of a veteran, they're like, fuck that.
It's
Go
I
on,
mean,
Mex.
your health, absolutely right. It's your knowledge base is so important, but your powers of deduction in determining what particular one facet of your health is out that is throwing things out. You see an overweight person in the gym flogging themselves. You're like, oh, I also had I got thyroid cancer. I had my thyroid removed 5 years ago. So, and that's never put into a factor. And all these things, it's how intelligent you are. Having a something that can put all these variables together in your life. Brilliant. And then what you can do is once you have the data, like it's amazing. No one's ever done a study that said if you effectively sleep, train, eat right, have discipline, all those the 8 pillars of Swiss Aid, you'll be better with your mental health. No one's ever done it. No one's like, you can't put 8 together. It's never been done. And we're like, yeah, well, let's do it. Like, oh, you can't do it. Got done. And then, right now you're affecting.
The thing is, we're doing it every day.
Correct.
You guys are just systemizing it and putting it out to people.
But everybody knows these things, right?
And looking for, I mean, the charity does help because it's looking for a way to build this with a financial model that's effective when we're going up against the 4 or 5 biggest organizations on the planet. Like this research has been done before, but it's been done by organized companies like Google, like Apple. Like they are tracking everything. If you're wearing an Apple Watch, they are tracking this stuff already. The problem is they don't want to turn it into a mental health app because the number one problem with your mental health right now, if you're listening to this, is how much time you look at your fucking phone. And Apple is never releasing holistic health data that says if you want to improve your well-being, we've got all the data points, we know how to do it, but you just got to switch your phone off for the rest of your life. Like that's never going to happen. And I mean, hopefully we don't get shut down. I love a good conspiracy about big tech companies shutting people down. I don't think we will. I think we'll be fine. But when we get this thing built, it's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, listen, man, you just made a really good point then. Like you guys are essentially a tech company at the moment, right? So, if people want to use the app to improve their mental health, then they need to use their phone. They need to use the app and they need to, start structuring in and utilizing this content. And a point that I want to make here is that, you're either using your phone as a tool or you are the tool and you're the one that's being used, right? Like I can use a hammer to smash someone's fucking head in, but I can also use that hammer to build a family.
Build a
or
house.
a nail, or I can use that to build a house for my family, right? Like how you use that tool is very important. And anyone that has been listening for a while knows that fairly regularly, every 4 to 6 weeks, I go away for a digital detox. Like I use my phone as part of my work, it's part of my job, right? Like sharing on social media some of the stuff that I'm doing with the fighters. I'm not sharing everything, okay, because my main fucking job is working with people, right? But I'm doing myself a disservice if I'm not sharing some of that stuff as well, right? So how you use that is just as important. Whereas you've got other people that are just sharing all of the stuff that they're doing, and that literally becomes their job, right? As you mentioned earlier with the influencer who's spending all their time on social media. So really, it really does. It is very important how you use these tools, how you wield them, but that's where the discipline comes into play. For me, I set my clock for 90 minutes every day. That's my social media time. And I do that in like 20 to 30-minute blocks throughout the day whenever I need to. And I know setting that left and right of arc, I know, all right, I'm getting on my phone. Boom. Boom, 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 boom. I don't fuck around. I don't scroll. I go on. I literally do what I need to do and I get off, man.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have, the good thing is between us and Google is we don't have shareholders. And so you're not going to lose board positions when you're telling people not to use your app. We're selling, it's trust and it's lived experience is what Swiss Eight's portraying as well. It's saying we're going through and doing it. And I think both of us, all three of us have sat there multiple times and been like, get off your fucking phones. Yeah, there is a time to use it. Yeah, we need to use some of the tools to get you into a routine, but get off your phones. And you probably won't hear 3 bigger advocates of that than on this call.
Mate, yeah, absolutely, and it's also about the evolution of the industry too, and what societies like, where they're consuming information. It's like you have to, it's a trade off. We're lucky; it all stems back to your end values, and we don't have shareholders, we don't have board members. Oh, we have board members, but not invested members that are directing where we're going. So, as long as we know that 10 years, 20 years, whenever it is down the track, when we get to a position and we go, if we can look at it and go, hey, people are ready for the education, the habit change, and they're ready to get off their phones, then we look at other ways to do the same thing or whatever it might be. But where we are at the moment, you have to meet the market in the middle, and everyone. We did look at the research, and there's plenty out there to show that even Facebook, it was started as a social networking platform. The intent behind it was to connect people, and what it did was disconnect the entire planet. We are aware that we are building a connection-focused and routine-building mental health app, and the biggest problem with people's connection and routine is that they stare at their phone too much. But we need to meet the market where it is. We need our biggest goal is to get information, education to people, and that at the moment means you need to be on social media, you need to be on apps, and in the digital space. 30, 50 years from now, who knows where we're going to be, but things are changing pretty quickly, and I think people will be ready. There's either going to, there's going to be evolution in technology as well, and we're going to get to the point, hopefully, where they invent phones that don't fuck your circadian rhythm, sleep cycle, your life in general, and we'll obviously, if we've got the capacity, be trying to drive trends to move away from whatever makes people lose their sleep and disconnect from each other. But yeah, I think where we are now, we have to accept it's a necessary evil, and the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But we are lucky enough that we don't have any kind of negative forces directing where we're heading. So
we are going through the technological revolution. We are living through that right now. You know, it is a revolution, and like the advancements are happening so fast. To tie into what you just said, like you guys are an app, you are delivered straight to somebody's phone so they can structure and schedule the most important things in their life, create a system that essentially, you know, sets up their day so they don't have to think about things too much, right? Now, for some, you know, people listening, think about this. There's things in your life that you've done before that you know make you feel better about yourself and how you're living. There's also things that you've done in your life that makes you feel shit about who you are and how you're living. You know, we need to ask the question, is this serving me? How is this serving me? So if you go onto your phone and you're spending time scrolling through social media, looking, you know, you're following accounts that make you feel shit about yourself, then like you're fucking doing that to yourself. You know, people need to take responsibility. However, if you're using your phone to go onto the Swiss 8 app and structure in there, you know, some mindfulness work first thing in the morning, and then some training, you're following, you know, performance functional training program, and you're looking at, you know, the nutrition side of things, and you're looking at, you know, some of the content to allow you to get to sleep and manage your circadian rhythm a little bit better. Like that is now serving you for the better. If something's not serving you for the better and it's creating a negative impact in your life, like how fucking long do you need to follow that before you go, oh, you know what, I'm doing this to myself? You know, one of my, I really like this quote. It's like, before you heal somebody, ask if they're willing to give up the things that make them sick.
yeah, fucking oath. Mate, I guess the tough part is that once you get into that state where you are staring at your phone too much, it does make you mildly depressed. The more depressed you are, the more dopamine you want. You go back, and it's a vicious cycle. And people, once you're deep into it, you don't even realize it. And you're staring at your phone for 2 hours, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I've been here for 5 minutes," but it's consuming your life. But no, I mean, as a easy to do life hack, I did that a couple of weeks ago. What you just said, just went through Instagram, and I was like, I'm not a fan of this feed. And then I was like, hang on a minute, I curated this feed. Subconsciously maybe, but I curated this feed. And I just went through and I just unfollowed or I think there's a way that you can say that you want to follow them, but you don't want to see their shit anymore. And just did that to all of the people whose content was either negative or all of the things that were distracting me that I had Anything that had meme pages are gone. Unfortunately, they're hilarious, but they had to go. And I got to the point where now I'm scrolling through and it's all relaxing shit, which it's a good test for people to go do it this week. In 4 weeks' time, come back and have a look at what your feed's like and what headspace were you in when you did that kind of cull. And everything in mind, well, it was up until a couple of days ago, everything in mind was just landscapey stuff, heaps of mountains. I'm a massive fan of having like Swiss Alps and mountains in the thing. And then now, unfortunately, I've started like every third photo because I followed the hashtag mountains, and now every third photo is a chick with giant tits with hashtag mountains in the bottom of it. So even at 36, I'm learning lessons about social media, but it works, mate. Like social media now is pleasant.
Well,
Whereas before it was.
Who's that blonde? Who was that blonde?
Someone.
So I think that's Margo. Fucking sounds like a little bit of renovations going on next door. Got a fucking jackhammer going on.
That was so good.
Yeah, who was that? I had a dude on my feed that was pissing me off, and he was a blonde personal trainer. And every time I opened it up, I'd lose my mind. I was like, hang on, I'll just unfollow him and problem solving.
Yeah. That's that Pommy, dude.
Yeah. But who's saying?
You're doing that to yourself, mate.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. I mean, Jordan Peterson talks about this, so do a bunch of good sites, but no matter what outside impact or outside influence on your life, it's your personal choice how you emotionally respond to it. And it takes fucking training. Like if a dog shits on your face, you are going to be grumpy in the first time. I was about to use some ex-missus analogies, but I'm like, no, I'm going to stay out of that rabbit hole at the moment. But if someone says something mean to you, if someone does something mean to you, like you getting shitty and you getting fired up and wanting to go down and troll some dude's social page and blow up at him, that dude's never met you. Like that the impact is your internal choice to go, I'm going to respond by getting grumpy and ruining my day. And that kind of concept, once you takes time, but once you can master it and go, no matter what happens to him, you super stoic kind of mentality. Regardless of what happens, I'm not going to have an emotional response. I'm going to sit there and think about how to react like a logical person. Changes your life, mate. And I'm nowhere near nailing it, but it's something I'm working on heavily.
Yeah, that stoicism. There's a really good book, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. That is, effectively diaries of he was a massive proponent and philosopher of stoicism in the early Roman times. But I was just saying, you were talking about industry being at the precipice or in the middle of the technological revolution, where we're getting all this technology, we don't know how to use it yet. The same thing happened in a different way when they first, like gin and when they started distilling liquor, hard liquor. People were shit-faced everywhere. Like you can go and you Google it, and the entire country, London, was drunk from the moment they woke up till they went to bed. Like it got bad. People found this new thing, and people were losing their mind. Like there's a couple of really famous art pieces where there's photos of mums and their kids are falling out of their arms and laying around in the gutters. Like they were so drunk, they were just leaving their kids in the gutters and stuff. So, and then finally we, through trial, probably lots of suicides, probably lots of death, we figured out probably shouldn't drink gin when you wake up in the morning. Like, and these things are portraying over. I don't know, where does...
And then information's getting passed on from generation to generation.
Yeah.
Hey, kids, probably shouldn't do this.
And it does, mate. And I mean, where do we go into the future, 20, 30 years' time? I'm hoping that the churches won't be around. Like there's going to be some empty buildings where the churches used to be. Could you imagine having a place where the app has taken people to a point, and then these buildings where people used to come for rhetoric and for hate are now put over to higher learning, teaching life lessons and education, and there's a church in every town. So see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's starting to happen. It's going to sway back and forward like everything does before it lands in the middle. But you are seeing like, because we're not believing in the information that we're getting from one political party or another, and that kind of dictates what the media pushes down to us. Some demographics within society are starting to build their own communities, and unfortunately, in the early days, it's going to get very cultish, I think, and they're frowned upon. There's a bunch of titles people give them, like anti-vaxxers and cults and whatever it is. But I think we'll end up finding a position somewhere in the middle between a two-party system and 1,000 hippie communes. There'll be a spot where it's like there's a handful of kind of value sets, and the church, I think it has to be replaced or evolve itself. I mean, who knows? But yeah, those buildings. I mean, that's what the RSL could have been. It could have been that place, like the Church of the Veteran, but they got stuck in their ways. They didn't adapt. They weren't agile enough, and unfortunately, there's buildings all over Australia now that are half empty. But yeah, I think we'll get there.
A place of worship.
Yeah, they used to worship pokies and beers, and now they slowly the good ones are putting gyms in, and they're starting to worship health and fitness, which is fantastic. But I think, mate, it has to happen. There has to be a new belief structure that moves forward and replaces what the bunch of religions did. I don't think it's going to be in our lifetime, mate, unless we adapt really quickly. They've all been trying to kill each other for that many thousands of years. I don't know if they're going to fade away just yet, but.
Something I want to touch on very quickly before I let you guys go is we mentioned earlier, like what's unfolding, in Ukraine at the moment. I listened to your guys' podcast. What was the guy's name that you had on ISS?
Sasha, yeah. So
yeah, I listened to that. A great podcast, man. I just finished reading a book, Prisoners of Geography, that talks about, those natural barriers and borders, and explains, how a lot of conflicts around the world in recent times have evolved, and how it's all kind of interconnected with, previous conflicts in history, and natural barriers and boundaries and things like that. Really interesting read. And he just kind of tied everything in that I was reading in the book. Which was, it was interesting because I think the book came out in 2016, and then, basically predicted what's happening and what's unfolding at the moment. I thought that was a really good episode. But what I want to touch on is, we are going through this technological revolution. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we were in Afghanistan, but we weren't carrying our fucking, the closest thing that we had to what they have now with these live feeds on social media is like helmet cam. Right, that was the closest thing that we had, and that was only a decade ago. And now you've got people that you can literally go onto social media platforms and you're seeing people walking along, taking a selfie, and then just fucking go up in a ball of flames. Like, how do you think that's going to either educate or impact, or what are the implications or unintended consequences that you see from what's happening over there? Not only what's happening over there, but how accessible that is to the average person.
Well, this is part of the thing. I mean, wars have been horrifically brutal since the first monkey hit the other monkey over the head with a stick. We just didn't have the knowledge. We never saw what war was about until World War One, World War Two, when we had black and white, and then we got videos, and World War Two in color. And the impact of war, that was why it was the war to end all wars, because the horror of it, we removed that romanticism of it, and we figured out it was just young people, governments playing on young testosterone-fueled men to go off on these adventures and kill people. We lost the ability when the internet came into the world, when telephones, when the world become a whole lot bigger, that you couldn't just put a poster up of the Turk, the evil big nose, or the Jew, the big evil big nosed Jew that was stealing everyone's gold. You couldn't vilify a country with a couple of posters. But now, with the amount of access we have to information, you're going to probably see twofold. Probably less hate, I would say, harder to galvanize a country to a particular objective, to see it through. We don't have the staying power. We don't have the hate built behind it. And I suppose maybe the second one is the horror that you'll see from these events in people's TV feeds and stuff. It's 4K footage of war. We've never seen this in our lives. I think it's going to have a massive impact.
Yeah,
I agree. Yes, I go, Sats.
Yeah, mate, it's definitely going to have an impact. I mean, I think there's a few different ways it can go. Part of me is like, the majority of the world is at war, and there's people dying in poverty all day, every day, and we're living in this Western bubble. It's about time people in the West, sitting in their lounge rooms on social media, get a little bit of reality and see like the horrors of the world, and maybe that will help them form better opinions when they come to vote. But I mean, the other scary thought is like that we've seen it from Hollywood, like time and time again, like movies about the future where reality TV shows of soldiers killing each other is a thing. And I'm like, is this setting the platform for people to, through exposure, be not just okay with witnessing combat fatalities, but crave it to the point where some sick fuck in Russia or wherever in the Eastern Bloc decides that I'm not only going to start live streaming, but I'm going to start deliberately trying to kill people on camera because it's making me money. And yeah, I think that's something that we need to keep an eye on. More than likely, the big media companies or the big social media companies and Google and stuff are probably tracking that already. And that kind of brings me to the real scary part of it is this is going to be super unpopular, and it's going to be unpopular to any veterans listening. I have controversial opinions on almost anything, but I think this is one of the greatest propaganda exercises we've seen in our kind of life. Definitely. I mean, I don't know how much propaganda was pushed in America around the invasions of Iraq and stuff, but within a week of Russia invading the Ukraine, and just as a kind of prefix, I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm just looking at it from a standpoint of going, what is actually going on here? Because I don't have any trust in most media companies. We have seen nothing but Ukraine's side of the story. We saw the minute Russia went across the border, there was preloaded, pre-recorded propaganda packages that hit every mainstream channel in the Western world of the Ukrainian president, who is an actor, telling stories of how hard done by they are and how evil the Russians are. Is that true? I have absolutely no idea. I can assume. I mean, I've been watching a lot of this live stuff too. When you take, I reckon there's probably evil people on both sides. There's definitely corrupt governments on both sides of that border. There is definitely influence from Western nations through NATO, poking the bear in the chest, and the bear said, fuck you, it's time to go, and now Russia's in the Ukraine. I mean, all of that has to be taken into account. Again, don't have a dog in the fight. But I don't know, when you see these propaganda packages and you've got people paying attention to conflict now in real time, the whole world is picking a side and saying that Russia's super evil. Russia's still got kids in the army that don't want to be there. Russia has officers that don't want to follow orders. Like, this is a government problem. There's two governments that hate each other, and young people are dying for it, as they always have. Is America partly to blame? Because they've got, like, I love American people. I fucking despise American politicians. I'm starting to form the same opinion in my own country. Like, Australian people, I think, are fantastic, but politicians, I don't know where their values lie anymore. So we've got to be careful, I think. All of this, we have got live feeds of people killing each other in combat, and we're picking a side, and we're choosing who's good, who's bad, who's right, and who's wrong based on a combination of that and the media message we're getting. And I think it's dangerous because the winner tells the story through history. Russia is very much Nazi Germany at the moment in the West's eyes, which leads you to question, like, yes, from history, Hitler was an evil person. How many of the soldiers underneath him were wishing they were born in a different country? How much of that was propaganda? How much of that history was propaganda written by the Allies? I don't know. It just makes me question things, and I want people to be very careful about watching propaganda that will, over the next year or two, villainize all Russian people. Like, we went to war against what I thought was an evil religion. I have very different opinions on Islam now, and there is flaws. Absolutely, there's flaws. But the propaganda from 9/11, 2001 through till a couple of years ago was that every Muslim was evil and we have to go over there and eradicate evil. And you start to believe it. And that kind of propaganda message, if the West is going to pick a side and they're going to go in and back Ukraine, in order to get soldiers to go and fight Russians, they are going to have to convince us that all Russians are evil. And they're going to do that slowly over time to the point where we're brainwashed to believe it. And every non-commissioned soldier in the Russian army, well, not everyone, I can't speak for them, but most of those guys are not evil. They're just kids who made the wrong choice and joined a fucked up career. So yeah, I think we're at a weird point in time, and it's getting dangerous if we start to. I like exposing people to the reality of war, but I also think it's dangerous the way we're heading.
Yeah, you make a good point there, and like I mentioned earlier, that book that I read, Prisoners of Geography, kind of predicted what's happening right now, and it gives a lot more context. So, as you said, it's been mentioned numerous times in the podcast, like, people live in an echo chamber, and if you never challenge those thoughts, then you never get the opportunity to see the other side. And, like, I definitely don't condone what Russia's doing, but given the context and from what I understand of the last decade, and provocations and issues that haven't been resolved that Putin's been asking for to to occur that haven't occurred. Like, it's kind of gotten to a point where like he has no other option. I'm sure he's got other options, but he's at the point where he's like, all right, well, NATO's pushing closer and closer, the borders are getting smaller, so on and so forth. Like, I don't have a choice now but to go on the attack. Like, offense is the best defense, right?
Well, I mean,
and this is something that people don't understand, and they don't have that context. All they're seeing is what's unfolding right now, but there's a long history there.
Two brilliant facts in that. Number one was when the USSR fell, and I think when Putin finally got into government, early 90s, he asked the UN, he asked NATO if he could become a member of NATO, and they said no. And they said whatever reason they gave, they said your standard of living isn't within NATO's tolerance. You can't be part of NATO. He's like, okay, well, can we call it the European Army, and we just make an army where all of Europe comes together, and we can? Like, no, you can't be part of it. It's like, cool, okay, cool. And then NATO started advancing across towards the west. And the biggest thing that I like to give people examples. Do you remember when North Korea tested one of their first ICBMs that could reach, I think it could reach the east coast of Australia or something like that. And we were up in arms, and people were spinning up contingencies to invade North Korea because we had an ICBM that could reach Australia. Well, if Ukraine become a NATO country, they will put nuclear weapons that have a flight time of 4 minutes to Moscow. And Putin was like, and after I think it was 7 different advances NATO made over the last 20 years, and Putin was like, "Can you please stop doing that?" Did another country. Can you please stop doing that? Did another country.
Exactly. And that's what people don't understand. It's like there has been these negotiations, and there have been these conversations before, man. But people don't understand that context. All they see is what's happening right now, and they're like I said, I'm not condoning what Russia's done or what they're doing, but there's a lot more context to consider with what's unfolding here. You look back at the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
That's all.
It's exactly the same thing, but now the roles have been reversed.
Well, they invaded straight at the Bay of Pigs, Cuban Missile Crisis, like massive. I think it's just funny how. I mean, I'm just as bad for it. I'll have an opinion about anything, but you see people who can't balance their checkbook or figure out, how to manage their week, and then they want to get into geopolitical situations and work on politics. Just have a look at it and try and look behind the lens, and don't get your information from a single source. Remember that unreliable single source reporting, you're probably going to get fucked up.
Mate, it's it's the perfect kind of tinderbox ready to explode for the entire world. I mean, that's why I thought World War III was a sure thing. I think we've done pretty well to avoid it so far. But if you get an entire society for 2 years locked in their houses, slowly but surely separating the elite class from the rest of the slaves, and the slaves that are sitting in their houses for 2 years just absorbing fucking garbage through their phone. And then the one thing that changes the media cycle is this evil dude in Russia invading Ukraine. And the first day Google turns off Russia, like no date, no information, no media streaming, nothing is coming out of Russia. We're going to believe, we're just going to sit there. We've already adapted over 2 years to just be staring at phones, consuming garbage. And we're like, all right, there's more garbage coming, but now it's coming from the Ukraine. It's all true. I hate Russia now. Let's go. And again, fuck, it frustrates me. Don't let me go down this tangent too far, but to see, I get it. Like, I get the boys that have been in fucking gunfights, the idea of going over there and supporting the Ukrainian. It's sexy. But fuck me dead. I don't understand how anyone from our generation could look at that and go, I have objectively looked at this scenario from both angles, and I'm going in to support Ukraine. Like, I just think that's absurd. I'm like, we're getting one side of the story, and we've been very well groomed for a few years now to accept the evil villain and just look the other way. Everything must be true. It's not.
Yeah. I could go down this rabbit hole, but I do need to call this conversation. I've got a client in 30 minutes, and it's a 25-minute drive. So, fellas, been absolute pleasure. Always love chatting to you guys. Really appreciate your time, sharing with me, sharing with the audience what Swiss 8's doing. I'll have all of your links in the show notes. Lads, love your work. Really appreciate you guys.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for having us on.
Mate. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, boys.